When we think of the newness of the incarnation, right? When Jesus chooses to become man, he now endows all of humanity with a greater grace and a greater ability to love. And we see this because we know that when Moses was dealing with his people, he allowed them to give a bill of divorce, right? If you had a problem with your wife for any reason, write her a bill of divorce, marriage is over. And when the scribes and the Pharisees approached Jesus about this question of divorce, he points out the fact that it was Moses who gave the people the ability to divorce, which was another way of saying that it wasn't God's intent. It was Moses who was dealing with hard-hearted people that had to allow for that reality. But Jesus then says, from the beginning it was not so. What God has put together, let no man tear apart. And we really get that sense of things when we hear from the prophet Hosea, because Hosea begins the whole of his prophecy by equating his covenant fidelity with Israel with a marital covenant. He even makes it very clear that when Israel goes off into idolatry, they're really committing adultery. They're turning their heart from the one true God and choosing to worship false gods. And because of that, the bride had been led astray. And so what is God doing? Well, he's sending Hosea, who even in his own life has married a prostitute and allows his whole life to be a prophecy against Israel and against their infidelity. But that brings us to the newness of what Christ has brought to us, and we need to take full awareness of this, take full measure of the grace that has been given to us, because it is the grace to love in a way that is new. And the newness and the power of that love is revealed in the woman with the hemorrhage and the girl that Jesus brings back to life, because in both of those instances, Jesus should have been made unclean by the woman who touched him and by his reaching out and taking the hand of the girl. The woman had a hemorrhage that should have rendered Jesus unclean. The girl was dead, and when Jesus touched her hand, he should have been made unclean. But that's why the gospel ends in such an interesting way. When the crowd was put out, he came and took her by the hand, and the little girl arose, and news of this spread throughout the land. Why? Not only because he had cured the woman and brought the girl back to life, everybody would have been talking about how that woman would have been well known, because she would have had to go through the streets very much like a leper, telling people not to touch her. And telling people, and even having to be absent from all of the celebrations that would have gone on in the local synagogue, never being able to go up to Jerusalem and enter the temple. She would have been somewhat of a known person. And yet for her to be cured and her to be healed, and for her to be healed in such a way that Jesus should have been made unclean by that touch, is just a sign to us that something new was happening, and the news of that, the good news of that, was spreading everywhere. And we should be recipients of that good news, and even recognize how now, when we approach Jesus in the Eucharist, he is giving us the strength to have hearts that are no longer hardened, but to be motivated by a great and selfless love. And the more that we realize that we are drawing strength from the font of love so that we can love, the more we enter into a real and authentic freedom. And when I even think about this in terms of, the dignity of women, it is a dignity that is revealed throughout the whole of the scriptures. A dignity because the bride is worthy of the love of the bridegroom. And it is also a dignity that is bound up very much with the gift of motherhood. And this is one of those things that's very challenging in our own day, because if I were to ask you, how is it that Jesus affirms the dignity of women? After all, he came as a man. So perhaps all of us men could say that we're better than all of you women. That doesn't go over very well, does it? No. How does he affirm that dignity? He does it in two ways. First, he's born of one. And that is a great challenge to our culture, because so many women, and even our culture in general, has been so influenced by this contraceptive mentality that we tend to not think of a woman's dignity as being bound up with motherhood. But that's a big problem, because motherhood is really what does fulfill a woman's dignity. And we know that because Jesus was born of a woman. And we need to return to that reverence for the gift of motherhood and recognize that there is a need to have hearts that are not hardened. Because when we have a contraceptive mentality, you have all sorts of people entering into all sorts of intimacies without any desire for the gift of life. And when life comes, it's no longer welcome as this amazing gift and this awesome opportunity to love all the more. It's seen as an enemy to one's freedom, and that's what leads to abortion. And one of the great statistics that I heard, it's just one of the saddest things I've ever heard about our culture. It's horrific. Do you know that 50% of all women in the United States of America will not have children? That's devastating news, because those women do not know where their dignity comes from, how to fulfill it in a beautiful way. And even if you can't be a mother because of maybe difficulties with, with conceiving a child or just the circumstances of life, that need to be a mother is always a part of every woman's dignity and fulfillment. And it's for that very reason that we're told at the very same time that many women will not have children, that women in our day and age are more depressed than they have ever been in Western culture. It's not a mystery. It's right there before us all the time. And at the same time, we have something to offer. An invitation to a great love. An invitation to say, be open to life, as much life as God will give. Because that life is an opportunity in every instance to say yes to a greater, more sacrificial love. And the more that we choose to love like that, the more every one of us fulfills our true dignity. It is found not in selfishness. It's not found in sin. It's not found in impurity. It is found in love. And we can know that love and even be strengthened in that love, especially when Jesus reaches into our lives and brings about healing and strength. And he does that every time we approach him and receive him in Holy Communion. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.